Alright, it's time for another late night video where I tell you a bunch of shit I've already told you or that you should already know. This is for all you new people. You will not die on me in combat. But you fucking new guys, you'll do anything to prove me wrong. You'll kick cans, walk on trails, and diddly bop through the bush like you're back on the block. Oops, wait a second. That's a different speech for when this all goes horribly wrong. So let's try and run this down by the numbers so that it doesn't, or at the very least, you'll know why you're out in the cold, scared, afraid, hungry, and wondering just what the hell happened to your freedoms. During the Bush senior administration, the push for globalism and what they call the New World Order really began in earnest. And they started installing what they call their people in certain positions in the government that weren't elected and that could stay there for long periods of time through several administrations, building the pieces and policies that they would need to enter the United States into globalism. What's globalism? What, have you been living under a rock? It's one world government where the power is taken from the people and given to a centralized group to have power over the rest of the world. That's globalism in a nutshell. A strong America is not within the globalist's best interest, because it can be held up as an example to the rest of the world of what it is like or can be like to have freedom. Therefore, it had to be undermined. That's why the schools operate and teach the things that they do nowadays. And social policies are enacted to control people's speech and confuse and disenchant everyone from the system that we live in, because it becomes so chaotic that it doesn't make any sense to everyone, and they lose faith in it. Then we move down the line to another Bush who was in the White House during a certain tragic incident that happened in this country that served two purposes for these people. One was to cover the amount of money that they had been stealing from the American public and pouring into their own pockets and system. And number two, to institute the policies and the final surveillance system that they would need in order to keep track and control the American people when this New World Order system, or globalism, was finally instituted in this country. Throughout our history, whether people know it or not, big events have been used to push the agenda and the American public and or opinion in the direction that they want it to go. And to give you a little example of how this system operates, every time the American public or the world gets onto their game, they try and ban the terminology that's used to push their agenda. Some phrase, by the way, that I can't use in this video, or it will end up being flagged. Then we move on to some other guy who wasn't qualified to do the job, but managed to send the message or idea that if he wasn't voted into office, that proved that this country was full of racists. So the American public, not being as awake as they are currently, did what they always do. They went with the narrative, and voted in a guy who wasn't qualified to do the job, but had the globalist and New World Order agenda in mind. Currently, there's been a lot of talk about Russia and their involvement in our government and politics. That's merely a red herring in order to distract people from certain events that went on during 2016. But I'll get into that in a minute. For anybody who pays attention to what goes on in China and how they suppress and control their people, should have noticed some parallels to the policies and ideas that are being instituted here in real time right now. That's what this push for globalism is all about. Control. And the economic failure that is Obamacare and the healthcare disaster that they pushed upon this country proves it. It was a beta test to see just how much they could get away with and what the American public would fall for. Because as I said before, a strong America is not within the globalist best interest. We had to be taken down and undermined. It's all part of the plan. That's why they took the coal factories offline. That's why the GDP, or gross national product, never grew more than a percentage point or two under the Obama administration. That was part of his job description. However, somewhere along the way, he started liking being seen as a hero by his followers and constituents, and he lost his nerve. I don't know how many of you recall a trip that Obama took to China where they didn't roll out the red carpet and made him disembark from the back of the plane. That was all because he was dropping the ball and not living up to his agreement to undermine this country and sell it out to China. That brings us up to the election in 2016, where the globalists and the New World Order supporters had become so cocky and arrogant that they were convinced that one of their candidates from either side, Democrat or Republican, would definitely be voted into office. Then along comes Donald Trump, who said he wanted to enter the race. And they said, sure, come on in. And they laughed at him and they made fun of him. And they said, out of their own arrogance, that he was a political joke and let him in the race strictly for the entertainment value because of their own arrogance, because they thought they had us right where they wanted us. But by saying the same things that he had been saying for years on talk shows and interviews and news articles about the American system being undermined by the trade policies that had been established, the ridiculousness of the central banking system, and the fact that our immigration policy was a freaking joke, somehow or another, he won the nomination for the Republican Party. That's when the Democrats in the Obama administration started to get a little bit nervous. And they decided they needed to run a behind-the-scenes surveillance on their main threat and outside man, Donald Trump. But they were still relatively sure that their candidate would win. So they kept going business as usual, but ran their little surveillance thing behind the scenes. That's when the supposed hacking of the DNC happened and John Podesta's emails were released to the public. That changed the whole game. People from within their own system, that's called the deep state, finally realized what was really going on and what all of this was all about. And information started being leaked to the other side as to what was really going on. So the Democrats in the Obama administration decided to blame everything on Russia, even though the DNC hack was an inside job. And that spawned what the Democrats called the insurance policy, quarterbacked by the FBI and the CIA and the Obama administration, among others who had already pledged allegiance to the New World Order system. Then along comes the election, and the weakest candidate and the most scandal-ridden candidate who I've ever seen in my life runs against a newcomer and loses. Whose job it was, mind you, to finally stab the knife into the American public's back and institute all of these policies, crush our financial system, and move us into the New World Order or globalist system. That was Hillary's job, by the way. And as an example, something she says after the last debate where she was firmly trounced and made to look extremely foolish. As she walked off the stage, she said to the people around her, "If that man gets elected, we're all going to hang." Meaning that obviously she was in this up to her eyeballs and realized that treason against our Constitution and founding document for this country had been committed along the way by many, many people. And going so far as to saying herself, "If I go down, you go down with me." That's when all these New World Order cockroaches started crawling out of the woodwork. The intelligence agencies have exposed themselves along the way. The media has exposed themselves along the way. And even the social media companies have exposed themselves along the way because they're in this up to their eyeballs as well. The algorithms were already written. The programs were already in place. And when their candidate, Hillary Clinton, didn't get elected, it went rogue. And that's why you only see shadow banning a little bit. You only see a few people's bank accounts being undermined and taken away, and so forth and so on. That was the general plan for everyone who wasn't willing to go along to get along. But when Hillary didn't get elected, they could only do it to selected people because it becomes too obvious if they try and do it to everyone. So, what was the Russia investigation with special counsel all about? Treason. What's the impeachment investigation and inquiry all about? Treason. And the fact that the Democrats and the previous administration and past, even before that, have something to lose and to cover up. And along the way, the same old tactic has been used. Blame the other guy for something that the other side is doing themselves. And what are they trying to blame Donald Trump of? What do they call him? They're trying to convict him, basically, of committing treason. They're trying to say that he's an existential threat to this country and the foundations of this country. When the reality of it is, They're the ones that did everything that they blame him for. And we're getting this close now to the other side exposing everything that they've done, meaning the Republicans exposing the Democrats through written documents and testimony, so that the American public can finally figure out what the hell goes on. And at the very least, if it all goes horribly freaking wrong and sideways, now you know the story, at least wise generally, so you could tell it to people around some campfire, and we can start this process all over again. And you can stand there and nod your head with understanding as I give the speech that I started at the beginning of this video, because you're no longer an F.N.G.